So you don't think it's ethically bad to steal babies away from their mothers?
Well, it is. Of course it is. So, I mean, it isn't that ethically bad. Like, of course, it is still ethically bad. But we're using a resource in a resource-poor environment.
We're using sentient beings.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is fucked. And I probably shouldn't, but I do a lot of things I shouldn't do every day. I'm quite comfortable in my decision in regards to that.
What if you was a cow?
Well, I mean, it sucks for the cow, of course, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
All life should be given the rights to survive. Oh, you're foolish fool, it's not up to you to decide who shall live and shall die. No. Me, I've been living the same way still. No blood shall spill to please my will. One pay the bills of the new slave will. No, this is not out of human importance, but you can't discount the others as worthless. No, say I want peace, that's great. Peace, it starts on your plate. Whoa, all life.
Hallo YouTube, Mathias her. Nå sitter jeg i Kubaparken på Vulkan. Prøvde egentlig å sette oss opp der borte først, men det blåste en del. Og så hadde vi med, ja, siden jeg har bedre lys, tok jeg med tripod for å få med skiltet mens jeg prater. Men så ble tripoden ødelagt mens vi prøvde å sette den opp. Så det blir fortsatt bare den i dag, men kan jeg håpe lyden blir litt bedre i hvert fall da. Det er en fin dag, godt og varmt. Vi er omringet av både menneskelige og ikke-menneskelige dyr, så vi får bare se hvordan det går.
And I agree.
You agree? Cool.
Keep going.
Thanks. Fikk hjelp av vennen min Tony til å filme introen, men han måtte stikke nå, så nå sitter jeg her alene. Siden jeg har mikken nå, så tok jeg sjanse på å sitte litt nærmere der hvor alle går, så håper det ikke blir for mye bakgrunnsstøy i dag. Skal på jobb etterpå, så jeg sitter her så lenge jeg kan. Ok, så før jeg viser denne diskusjonen, så har jeg lyst til å si litt. Vanligvis så prøver jeg å vise hele samtalen sånn den utarter seg, og med minst mulig klipping. Med mindre folk kommer med noen sensitive opplysninger eller ting de ikke vil ha med eller noe sånt da. Både fordi jeg har lyst til å være genuin og ærlig, og for at folk ikke skal tenke, oi, der var det et klipp. Så der klippte han bort noe han ikke klarte å svare på, liksom. Men denne gangen så har jeg klippet litt og trimmet samtalen ned litt. Vi snakket i over en time, og jeg hadde lyst til å gjøre det litt lettere for folk å komme seg gjennom den. Jeg har jo lagt ut lange samtaler før, og jeg har ikke noe imot å ha lange samtaler hvis de faktisk går noe sted. Men den samtalen her var litt all over the place. Den hoppet frem og tilbake, og han virket mest interessert i å finne på hypotetiske scenarioer for å gjøre det vanskelig for meg. Mens det jeg vil snakke om er jo den virkelige verden. Så mye av det jeg har klippet bort er tenkepausene mine og litt sånn snublete formuleringer før jeg kom til poeng og så videre da. Og så klippet jeg bort deler av samtalen hvor jeg følte at vi bare gjentok oss selv og det gikk i ring. Jeg synes samtalen var interessant i starten, men mot slutten fikk jeg ganske hodepine. Og ikke fordi han nødvendigvis hadde så gode poenger, men fordi det var vanskelig å få han til å forstå at etikk ikke bare kan kokes ned til et regnestykke om utslipp. Så vi snakket litt forbi hverandre. Jeg synes jeg kunne ha klart meg mye bedre i denne samtalen, og en ting jeg skulle ha kjørt han hardere på var nettopp det at etikk handler om mer enn utslipp og miljøavtrykket vårt. Jeg var jo inne på det når jeg nevnte at bedre dyrevelferd er verre for klimaet og for miljøet, men jeg skulle ha gitt han noen eksempler da. For eksempel så er det mindre skadelig for klimaet å spise fugl og fisk enn rødt kjøtt, men også mindre etisk siden man da dreper mange flere individer. Og mange umoralske handlinger kan være bra for miljøet. Altså, færre mennesker betyr også et mindre klimaavtrykk, så hvis jeg for eksempel prøver å drepe så mange mennesker som mulig, så hadde jo det kanskje vært bra for miljøet, men det er åpenbart ikke etisk. Og klimakrisa er jo ikke en rettferdiggjørelse for terroraksjoner. Så det skulle jeg ha fått bedre fram. For poenget hans var liksom at fordi han reduserte utslippene sine på andre måter, så rettferdiggjorde det at han fortsatte å betale for animalske produkter. Han mente det var like ille å kjøpe en iPhone som å kjøpe ost, og når jeg sa at det var spørsmål om nødvendighet som var forskjellen, så mente han bare at alt vi gjør er unødvendig, så da var det liksom det samme. Men altså, man kan jo ikke sammenligne å kjøpe en telefon med kidnapping, slaveri og strupekutting, liksom. Det er jo helt på trynet. Men sånne folk da, som sier rett ut at de driter i kuer og bare nekter å forstå den brutaliteten, da burde man heller kjørt med sånn Joey Carbstrong-taktikk, tenker jeg. Hatt laptopen klar med klipp fra slakterier da. Ulempen da er at da må jeg se mer på sånne ting selv også, noe jeg ikke vil. Men samtidig så er det jo det som er mest effektivt da, så jeg vet ikke helt. Og det jeg synes er vanskelig er det å snakke om miljøet uten å bare få det til å handle om det. Vi må jo snakke om å ta miljødebatten også. De henger jo sammen. Men da er jo faren at sånne som han da, som sier at det er galt å mishandle dyr, men det er ikke så galt liksom, og han gir litt faen i det, da tenker jo de at det bare handler om klimaet. Så det er vanskelig. En annen ting jeg burde ha klart bedre var å avslutte samtalen før, og spart litt hjernekapasitet til å kanskje snakke med flere folk i stedet. Han sa jo han var enig med meg flere ganger, men før jeg rakk å liksom runde av da, så kom han på andre scenarioer og andre sider av saken han ville snakke om da. Så ja. Hva tenker dere om det jeg sa om å klippe i samtalen? Er det bra eller dumt at jeg gjør det? Hvis jeg hadde klart å runde av før, så hadde jo ikke behovet for å gjøre det vært der i utgangspunktet. Så det er jo åpenbart kanskje løsningen fremover. Og en annen ting, jeg legger jo også til kommentarer på skjermen og sånn etter debatten. Noe de som jeg snakker med ikke har muligheten til da. Er det også litt urettferdig av meg, eller er det greit siden det er jeg som lager filmen liksom? Jeg vet ikke. De har jo mulighet til å kommentere videoen etterpå da, hvis det skulle være noe. Men ja, det er bare sånn man blir flinkere, at ikke alt går på skinner liksom. Men i hvert fall, jeg setter veldig pris på innspill da, hvis noen har det. Så da bare kjører vi i gang.
Annoying one. Insects. Can they really feel pain at all?
Insects have nervous systems and pain receptors.
They do? Like even like a mosquito?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess that makes it cooler then, I guess. I don't know.
You want to sit down and have a chat about it?
Quick one, because I don't really
Yeah?
know. I thought about it while I was biking up, and I can't really argue against it in any way. I mean, it is cruel, but I still do it nonetheless, you know?
Killing mosquitoes, you mean?
Well, yeah, of course, it's fuck mosquitoes, but like eating cheese and shit like that. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be cool though, like to eat cheese and a dairy, for instance.
Okay. Well, in order to produce milk, a couple of things has to happen.
Oh yeah, you separate the yeah, that's pretty fucked up. Yeah, can't really argue against that one. But
No.
Can you I mean, you could technically, while it has a child, you don't separate it from its mum, and it still lactates, and it might produce some milk that you can consume ethically from it though. Can you?
I think a lot of places in India that's the case, where the cows are selectively bred to produce way more milk than they naturally would. So they are still separating the calves from the cows eventually, but the calves get to stay longer with them.
Yeah.
But since they are producing way more milk than they naturally would, that also depletes their bodies of nutrients. So Same goes for like most cows and egg-laying hens, for instance. All the like commercials they say like all these good nutrients are in milk and eggs. All those nutrients get sucked out of the body of the animals.
Yeah.
So
Can't that be replaced through dieting? No, diet for an animal though. You could compensate it for it.
only so much until they're worn out and can't take it anymore and have to be put down.
But isn't the lifespan of a farmed animal usually way longer than a wild one?
Cows, for instance, can live till 20 years, 20-25, but most never get older than like 3, 4, 5 years.
I'm talking about like a hypothetical. Like you could have a cow that you don't separate from its mother that would produce milk, and you could adjust its diet by feeding it like good animal feed that depletes the nutrients that it loses, and the end result will be an animal that lives longer than it would technically do in the wild, wouldn't it? And you would, in principle, have ethically produced milk, which can be cheese or whatever. Perhaps, I don't know.
But maybe, but that's not an option available
No,
to us.
completely not.
And another thing is that for cows to produce milk, they have to get pregnant first.
Yeah.
And like that's usually also not something they choose on their own.
But what is the reproduction rate in nature? Like, do they get like does a cow get pregnant every year? Is that normal in nature? And if that happens when we farm them, isn't that almost the same?
If I wouldn't say it's the same to jack off a bull and then fist the cow, than to let them do each other on their own.
They could do it on their own though. Like if they have properly fed and they're in a safe environment, they would naturally breed though, wouldn't it?
Okay, but again, that not an option available to us. But maybe you can argue, like in a hypothetical scenario, that it's hard for me to like see that situation. Like when will we need to do so?
Very, very unlikely. It's not going to happen. But in theory, you could. But I don't know. But I'm still about the insects one though. I'm not completely sure because I haven't really read up on it. But in theory, you could. I didn't know insects really had like a conscious mind with pain receptors and all that. I didn't know that. Are you completely sure?
Yeah, at least most, maybe not all, because if we can like go into gray areas of animal sentience. Some people talk about mussels or like manatees and stuff like that being a gray area because they have nerves, but they're not connected into nervous systems. So they don't have like a center inside of them that processes what the nerves feel, as far as we know at least. But animals that are like move a lot, then that requires kind of a nervous system. Yeah. And the ability to feel pain is closely linked to the ability to move. Because it's when we move, we have a reason to feel pain. Because pain is actually a good thing, because it tells us to move away from danger. So of course, an insect's sentience is uncomparable to. I mean, I would much rather kill an insect than a cow. Yeah, but they still have nervous systems. And also you can argue, like, does less intelligence mean less sensitive? Because a lot of times it can appear that's not the case. If you look at kids, for instance, less intelligence than us, but more controlled by their emotions, you could say, maybe.
Yeah. But okay, if we farm maggots, for instance, and we give them a safe environment where they live a normal lifespan, and we then kill them, quickly and painlessly to consume them. Wouldn't that be ethical? Because I mean, you're giving it the full maggot experience, and you're killing it off quickly. So it's in theory, it's getting an equal life to the one in nature.
But they don't get their full lifespan if you kill them.
Oh yeah, because maggots turn into something afterwards, right? Or what?
I don't know, but there was a contradiction there in what you said. You said if you let them live their whole full lifespan and then kill them.
Yeah.
But if we kill them, that's not their full lifespan.
Oh, yeah. But if we give them the full lifespan which they have in nature, because often farmed animals live longer than the equivalent in nature, right? Often, at least. At least say that's the case for maggots.
I would still call that cruel, because we are at the end of it, we're still taking their life from them.
Well, we already gave them the more life or the same life that they would have in nature. So we're not really reducing anything which we already gave them.
Okay, if I make a baby, me and my girlfriend make a child,
Yeah.
and we calculate what's the average lifespan of a human.
Oh, yeah.
When that child reaches that age,
Yeah,
can I kill it?
Yeah, no, I get it. Although I'd say that a child is very different from a maggot, you know? Like, it has social relations with people around it. It's of one of our offspring, so it has all those social implications being that. I don't think the maggot necessarily has strong family structures and stuff like that, you know?
No, of course. I'm not saying those are the same. I'm just curious, like, what justifications are for us to do so.
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one because we are still ethically killing something which had the potential to have a longer life, and that in itself is unethical. But you could argue it's compensated by the fact that we actually gave it that life in the first place, and we gave it safe surroundings. But it's still not a very good argument. So I can't really win in it. So yeah, I know it is unethical, but I'm probably still gonna do it.
We can go into like the gray areas of like insect sentience and all of this, but
It's very niche. Yeah.
but I'm curious, like to see what common grounds we have. So, do you agree that meat is a cruel product in itself?
I mean, if you just take meat isolated as a thing that you kill and eat, then it is cruel, yes. But in a wider societal context, it is different. Say you live in a steppe in Mongolia, and to live there, you don't really have many food options. The only few food options you have is to farm cattle or horses or whatever that feeds off grass that you then can eat. Then I'd say that, okay, maybe it's a bit unethical because it's still killing something, but it's still necessary because you don't really have any other options.
You hit the nail on the head there, necessary. So now we can also start separating between necessary and unnecessary cruelty. And like you said, if you don't have any other options, violence is like the only way for us to survive, which our ancestors had to. Like, then you can justify it. Then it's justifiable. But say someone living in Oslo with all the opportunities we have here, yeah, you agreed that then eating dead animals when we don't have to is cruel?
It is to some degree cruel, but again, you could argue that we live in a sort of climate where it's very difficult to grow crop, and one of the easier things to grow in Norway, or not grow, but animals are a lot easier to. Okay, we have a lot of land which isn't usable for farming, right? But we have a lot of land which is usable for grazing. So to use our natural resources to produce food for ourselves, it makes sense to use animals as a part of that because of our natural surroundings. Although it is cruel against the animal, it makes sense for which country we are. For like the Alps, for instance. If you live in the Alps, you can't really farm anything, but you have tons of grazing, and it makes then sense to send cows up there to produce milk and produce, cheese.
Yeah, it's an argument I've heard before that if we didn't graze animals, we would rely more heavily on import food. But actually, like the animals are only grazing for parts of the year, so the rest of the year they too feed on imported like grains or soy. So
They don't have to be though. They are, but they don't have to be. Like you could have a smaller scale production and hold and do a bigger effort to produce food for over the winter, but that's not economically feasible.
yeah, and my stance is also that a vegan world would be much better for the environment. There's studies saying that if the world went plant-based, we could reduce the agricultural land by 75% globally, because now the animal agriculture is taking up 83% of our agriculture land, but simultaneously only producing like 16% of our calories. The last number I'm not as sure about as the others, but I think it was about yeah. But if I start to only go into like an environmental aspect of it, then the better the animal welfare is, the worse it is for the environment. You know, the longer we let the animals live, the more space we give them, the more resources they cost, and the less sustainable it is.
We could have like pigs that eat off food and farm waste, for instance, and those could. I mean, the longer they live, the more waste they consume, but what they are consuming is waste in the first place. So they don't necessarily have a larger footprint if they just live longer. You know, does it make sense?
But they are still like producing CO2 and methane and all of this.
But I think meat in a very small scale is feasible in a sustainable manner, because you can, like chickens and pigs in the old days, their function was to eat farm waste to produce food which was edible for humans, and the farm waste wasn't edible for humans in the first place. So they took unedible food and produced edible food out of it, and I still think that has a role in today's society. You know, does that make sense?
But it doesn't have to have a role. I mean, just because just because things are a certain way now, and with the food system we have in place now,
I'm not talking about how it was traditionally like 200 years ago. You know.
And but 200 years ago they didn't have the opportunities we now have. Yeah. And also like people use the same argument you said about not enough land to grow crops in Norway. Mm-hmm. But now there's actually like technology which makes we can grow plants even without soil, and vertical farming and stuff like that. So the
question is economic feasibility though. Like, is it we could literally do anything we want, but the question is how much does it cost? You know, if it's extremely expensive to do something while the other thing is unethical but costs way less, then that's usually the way we'll go.
Yeah.
And you could say you can use that money to do more ethical good by doing other means than vertical farming. Like, for instance, if you take that same amount of money and donate it to like third world countries, that might have a larger ethical impact than maybe spending it all on agriculture in Norway.
I don't disagree like on principle, but when you said like how did you say it? If you have one system that's maybe a bit more unethical but it costs less, but when we look at the state of the world and how much the animal agriculture actually costs us, you know, we have a system in place that we feed 60 to 80 billion land animals a year, and 1 to 3 trillion marine animals a year, while at the same time struggle to feed 8 billion humans.
You can't argue for that in any way. I mean, it's obvious that you can't really stand for that.
And we are burning down our rainforests to make way for more grasslands and crops, and to feed even more animals, so to produce even more meat to the rich part of the world, at the same time as kids are dying of hunger, and I'll say like animal agriculture is in that way the most costly thing.
Yeah, if
can
you
have.
if you include its environmental impact, it probably is super expensive. But right now, environmental impact isn't measured in money, and when that's not the case, it won't really have an impact on the economy. You know, like people won't give a shit if it doesn't cost them money.
Until they have to move into underground bunker and when the Earth's crust is burning up. But
It's a little bit too late to do anything by that point. So.
yeah, exactly. But if you go back to the ethics of it, what's your stance on? Okay, of course we talked a little about meat. What do you think would be the hardest for you if you try to go vegan? Because it's easy to get lost in all this big picture and the world and all the planet and feel so helpless and small. Like it doesn't matter what we do, but every time we sit down to eat, we can do something. Mm-hmm. So what would you think would be hard for you if you tried going vegan?
The hardest thing would probably be cheese, because cheese is fucking delicious. And I don't know, it's one of my few real pleasures. So I really couldn't give up cheese. Meat and stuff is fair enough. You can replace it with lots of good meat substitutes and use chickpeas and all that. But cheese you can't really replicate, and cheese is just amazing.
It depends. There are a lot of bad vegan cheeses, I'll give you that. But there are also some good ones, so you just have to find the right ones. Like I've tried the vegan cheddar I liked, and also Coop has a feta cheese.
I think about it this way: like you can get alcohol-free beer, and it's half decent, but it's still not the real thing. And when it comes to cheese, I find it like particularly the case. You know, like some things are really difficult to substitute, and cheese is really one of those.
I get your point, but okay. But do you think?
Also, I don't really find the ethics of cheese necessarily that bad, considering where you are in the world, of course. Like if you're on the Alps, it makes sense. I don't really find it that ethically bad to do it.
But so you don't think it's ethically bad to steal babies away from their mothers?
Well, it is. Of course, it is. So I mean, it isn't that ethically bad. Like, of course, it is still ethically bad, but we're using a resource in a resource poor environment.
We're using sentient beings.
Yeah, no, it is fucked, and I probably shouldn't, but I do a lot of things I shouldn't do every day. Like I mean, I could also not travel with a car. You know, I could also not buy shit, but I still do all of these things, and it's difficult to not do them. And it comes to like how much personal sacrifice vs gain do you get, and I don't see that the gain is so substantial for the amount of personal sacrifice when it comes to cheese.
The difference in buying animal products and doing other unnecessary things is that the unnecessary animal products have victims involved.
So does everything else. Like if I buy a electric car, for instance, or I drive my car a shit ton, I'm releasing lots of CO2, which is negatively impacting the environment, which is then killing off lots of animals and making it difficult to light for everyone else. It's just less direct.
Yeah, but that would be really impractical if we would try to live in a way where we didn't cause any harm, and that's not what veganism is either. It's just about minimizing the harm you're causing as far as practically possible.
Yes, but I'm saying that everything you do in terms of consumption has a harm, no matter what. But some of it is much less direct, so it's harder to measure. So I can sacrifice a lot of things in my life to reduce my impact, but it depends on how much of a personal cost it has, though. And I guess about priority for my own priorities. You know, like do I weigh animal suffering over CO2 emissions and whatnot?
Yeah, but won't you say that's a quite improportionate comparison to steal someone's babies away and polluting a little bit more?
Well, depends. Can you come with a specific thing, like because it's a broad statement. So if can you say?
I was just using your example.
Like a new iPhone vs not eating cheese. Is that a fair comparison?
I mean,
Because that's the same personal sacrifice at minimum, and I'd say that the iPhone kind of has a larger impact on the world than necessarily eating that cheese, and that buying a new iPhone is potentially worse ethically than buying cheese.
I'm not sure, maybe, but I'm not sure what's worse. But thing is, in the modern day society we live in today, you can't get by without a smartphone. That's a necessity. That's something you need.
That's the thing, that you could argue the same for cheese, almost. I mean, you could live without a smartphone. It is completely.
I've lived almost 2 years without cheese, and no problem.
Yeah, okay, I get it. Like the personal sacrifice for not eating cheese is far less than not having an iPhone. I get that, but so that's maybe not the best example. But yeah, no, it is. In the things I should not do, probably eating cheese is one of the things I shouldn't. But I already sacrificed by eating as little meat as possible and whatnot. So I'm gonna reward myself by eating a little bit of cheese. Okay.
Yeah, and all steps in the right directions are good steps. So if you abstain from eating other animal products, that's really good.
I don't, but I at least try to reduce it.
Okay, but the reason I'm not advocating for that, not advocating for reduction, is because to the animals that are still being exploited and used, that has no effect.
Yeah,
if I want to go and kick ducks in the head, and that I find pleasure in doing so, I'll say, okay, but I know it's a little cruel, so today I'm only going to kick one duck in the head and not 3. To that one duck, I go and kick.
Yeah, it doesn't give a shit if it's 20 or 1 ducks, of course.
Exactly.
I mean, it's still ethically bad. So I mean, there's no counter argument to it.
Yeah. So will you say then? I know you don't live by it yourself yet, at least. But will you then say you agree with the statement?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, you can't really disagree with it. Because I mean, you're doing physical harm to another conscious being, and if you're doing that, you're being unethical in any way. You can't really. It's a non-argument. Yeah. So, but I thought about another example. Like if you eat an animal which has died of natural causes, and you eat that one, that could be ethical, no?
Yeah, you could say. I wouldn't have a problem if people ate dead animals they found. I wouldn't, but I wouldn't do so myself. But
could we create a farm where we only eat the animals that have recently died? A farm where we treat them unrealistically good.
The reason why that never happens, why all animals we eat are relatively young when we kill them, is for 2 reasons. So that they taste better and cost less to raise.
This is again one of my silly hypotheticals, which is completely unrealistic. But you could, in theory, create a farm where you only eat the animals that are dying. Well, not. Yeah, you only eat the animals that have recently died. You could, in theory.
Die by themselves, you mean?
Yeah. Of age or whatever. They might taste like shit, but at least it's ethical meat.
Yeah, you could say if that was an option. If I struggle a bit to see how they could find that profitable, or
Definitely
to.
profitable.
No. I'm glad you at least agree that there's cruelty involved in making cheese, and even if everyone aren't going to go vegan right away, at least getting people to agree with veganism is also like a step in the right direction. Eating plant-based now, at least, is the most ethical thing to practically implement. But that doesn't mean we should stop there. We can create a better food system, better agriculture systems that rely less on transportation and stuff like that. But
what about lab-grown meats then?
I don't see any problem with that.
They use nervous systems because again, that's muscle, right? But it's not a. It's a disconnected nervous system, no?
I think they clone one cell from an animal, and with that one cell they can create like many pounds of meat, or I don't know how much or how exactly it works, but the pieces of meat they create in the lab are definitely like non-sentient, and they can also, so that's and it requires way less resources, and it's they can make it more healthy as well, like less cholesterol and all this. So I'm really in favor of lab-grown meat. I haven't tried, although I haven't had the option. But that you can argue, you can say it's an animal product because the first cell they cloned was from an animal.
Yeah, but you could do that. You could probably remove that in a non-harmful way, though. I mean,
Yeah.
and also if it's just a simple poke of a needle. I mean, I don't think that's.
Yeah, and that needle poke saves like hundreds of
Yeah.
animal lives. Then of course, yeah.
Then it's like negligible pain. I also thought of another unrealistic hypothetical here. They're interesting in terms of ethics. If you have like, okay, say we have fylke. What's that in English again? I can't remember. A commune or something. Okay, we have a large area of land.
So you're Norwegian?
Yeah. Norwegian English. So
Oh, okay. Then
we could have done this in Norwegian. I
yeah,
guess.
we could.
The
But
question was in English, so I assumed. Wasn't it English?
yeah, but all Norwegians understand English. That's
Yeah.
why. But it's okay. We started in English.
For me,
We can.
English is almost easier, so I don't know.
Yeah, okay, but then we can do it in English. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry, you were
so
saying.
you have a large land area, right? And you can do something unethical in the beginning. So you kill most of the predators in a land area, right? That's unethical, of course. But and then you can have a huge population of some animal that you could, in theory, kill off slowly, and you can still have like a sustainable population. The animals will still have fulfilled lives, and they would still have a lifespan which is considered above average to the normal life they would. Then we basically just replace the existing predators, which are in a way being unethical themselves, killing off other animals. Aren't we in the grand scheme of things just taking their killing and replacing it with our killing, and that therefore not being unethical?
The difference between humans and predators, okay, a couple differences, but one important difference is that we are moral agents. We have an understanding of right from wrong. Like animals in nature do a lot of things, like killing, raping, and they, with their cognitive abilities, they don't have a perception of right and wrong in that sense that we have. So with our cognitive abilities, I think comes some responsibility. And let me just, yes, so that's one difference I think is important. The other thing is that we can survive without eating any animals, which, like predators, they hunt out of necessity. They have to kill in order to survive. We don't, and when we have the option of not doing so, that's when it becomes a moral choice or a moral issue.
I get it, but for the as the example of hitting the duck in the head with a rock, if it gets killed by I don't know, a mountain lion or a human, it doesn't really care. It's still getting killed, right? So if 5% of the animal population get killed by predators every year, and we replace that 5%, it doesn't really matter for the animal getting killed. So I'd say ethically, we could avoid doing it, but it will be the least ethical. It will be one of the feasible ways to be close to ethical killing of animals.
Yeah, but if you replace, like, I mean, in the scenario you're talking about, are we then exterminating the predators?
Well, we already have in many places. Like
Yeah.
say Norway, for instance, we killed most of the wolves, right? And we have a deer population which is far too big for. It's not unhealthily big. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think so, at least. So in one way, we're hunting them as replacement for the wolves that used to be here.
Well, one part of that I think is cruel. Is cruel to the wolves. We've replaced, like you say.
That's already done, right? So I mean, it's unethical if we reproduce that scenario in different places where there are existing wolves. But when we already fucked the wolves enough, then that damage is already done. Right?
Are there other ways we can control deer population instead of going out to kill them?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
What about we de-sex them?
Yes, we could do that actually. Yeah, no, it's a fair argument. I mean, you could castrate them and then to control the population. Yeah, but again,
Yeah, if I was the deer, I'd much rather be sterilized than have my life taken away from me.
yeah, but okay, but then we've done. You have the natural baseline of ethics, right? Whereas 5% gets killed every year. Now we're instead we're castrating them so they don't get killed naturally like they would be, but they die of old age and they don't reproduce as much. Then we're actually done a ethics positive thing in accordance to the baseline. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But if the baseline is what we want to strive after, then replacing predators doesn't necessarily make us less ethical than it would be in the current state.
No, and that's not what I'm advocating for here either.
But it's an example of you could eat meat in a way which is in the grey area of being ethical.
Yeah, you can find like many like gray area hypothetical.
This one is actually rather. It happens in Norway like now, like with hunting of deer, for instance.
But do you think people hunt deer out of I've heard hunters say this, that like if I shoot a deer, it has a way better death than if it gets killed by a wolf. But then what I don't understand then is if it's really a mercy killing, then wouldn't the logical extension of that be to leave the dead deer in the woods, because the predator still has to eat. So now you have like one deer shot and killed, but the predators which are still there, they still have to kill.
But if we already removed these predators like 100 years ago, you know?
But okay, yeah, but from now on, like completely exterminating predators in order for us to do the killings more humanely ourselves, I think that would be catastrophic to the ecological.
Yeah, it isn't a very. It's an unideal scenario, but it's far more ethical. On the scale of being unethical, it's more ethical than, for instance, factory farming. It's one of the few scenarios where I can find it the least unethical, but it's still unethical. I don't really have. I think I'm gonna chill and read a book soon, but
Okay.
I enjoy being a pain in the ass. So.
No, I asked for it, and yeah, I don't think you've been a pain in the ass. I think this is interesting discussions, and we can like hypothetical scenarios. We can talk a lot about, and yeah, we can think of many like scenarios. But that's one side of it. But if we focus on like how things are, the world we live in now, with the options we have now, that's like what we can do something about.
Yeah.
So the only way for humans to consume milk is that like that milk should have gone to someone else who's then taken away from their mom. And I get that like it tastes good, you get sensory pleasure from it.
Makes sense according to your natural environment, for instance, as well. As the Alps.
Using sensory pleasure as a justification for violence, rape, kidnapping, killing.
I get that, but that's the best of those two arguments. Like the best argument for eating dairy in, for instance, Mongolia, for instance, would be that you don't really have any alternatives, or because of the natural surroundings are really predispositioned for this kind of farming.
Yeah, I agree. If you don't have any other options, then...
Well, I mean, you can also have other options simultaneously and have a natural environment which is good for this sort of farming. So like because we're globalized, right? You always have another option. So even the guys in Mongolia have the option, but like us in Norway, we have a nature which is really good for animal for like dairy products. I'd say that it makes sense for us to use it, even though it is a bit unethical for the animals.
And I would say that, like, even though we have grass fields, then we don't always need to use and exploit everything in nature. I think nature would benefit if we left more of it alone. And even though people use the argument of we can graze animals, yeah, but they can't graze the whole year, so they're also eating crops, which also could have been fed to directly to humans instead, for instance. Yeah, that's my position on that.
Okay. I don't really disagree with you, to be honest. I just ignore the ethics when I eat cheese.
So will you try to think a bit more about it when you look at cheese in the store and see cheese in the menu? Will you think that this cheese, the milk in this cheese was actually not supposed to go to me?
Maybe a little bit, because we had the discussion, but no, I'm quite comfortable in my decision in regards to that.
What if you was a cow?
Well, I'm not a cow, so.
But how does that make a difference for the cow?
Well, I mean, it sucks for the cow, of course, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Same with buying iPhones. Like those fuck up the planet and.
But we'd need those.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue you don't really need it, but the same comes with me buying new clothes, like a new hat or new sunglasses. I could probably live without it, but I still do it nonetheless. I find cheese to be in the same category as that.
But if I walked around naked with no smartphone, then I wouldn't be.
With a really tiny house and one set of clothes,
It would be really impracticable. I would say maybe impossible to.
Because it has a large social cost to you, right? No, exactly. Yeah. And I say that the cheese is the same problem for me. It has a large social cost for me, and the potential benefit is rather small, in my eyes.
So you think the pleasure you get from eating cheese, if you had to not give it up completely, because you can still have, like I said, vegan cheese, but you reduce the pleasure a bit if you don't feel the taste the same. So it's not even about like giving up something completely. It's just about reducing the pleasure you get from it a little bit. I wouldn't compare that to not buying phones, clothes, and living in a cave.
No, I mean, but I could compare it to buying a little bit less clothes and living in a little bit smaller house. Like we all do sacrifices for a greater good, and which sacrifices we do as individuals is up to us. Like I can choose to bike more and live in a smaller house, and that can be my sacrifice, and then I can go home and eat cheese, and that can fill my quota of acceptable change.
But when you eat cheese, so you are sacrificing someone else.
Yeah, again, you sacrifice something else with everything indirectly.
Someone. You said something.
Or something, like if you buy a bigger house, you're creating larger CO2 emissions, which are slowly killing lots of animals in Africa and destroying the lives or the habitats for, I don't know, people somewhere close to the equator.
You can get by without building a huge house as well?
Not a huge house, like a smaller apartment, like, okay, I have 110 square meters, I go down to 80. I think that has a larger impact than maybe not eating cheese.
Okay, but I feel like we're going a bit in circles here, but you understand, like, there's a difference in what we do out of necessity and what we do out of pleasure, on top of necessity.
I'm saying that we do a lot of things for pleasure already, like everything. If you take everything, I mean, the bare necessity is basically just roof over our heads and one set of clothing. That's the basic necessity. Everything over that is luxury, right?
Yeah, if you put it like that, but we still have to function in society. We still have how our society works. I need like electricity, internet, like communication opportunities. Otherwise, I can't connect with people. I can't have a job. Like, so I wouldn't compare
Okay, I get it.
all. Yeah.
But maybe say you live in a, I don't know, how big is your apartment, for instance? You could easily live in like 20 square meters, and that would have probably huge impact on your environmental print, right? But you don't do it, right? You don't want to live in like a tiny, small apartment.
If that was the only option I had, I'll go for. I'll take what I could find.
But say you could live much smaller and have a smaller carbon footprint, but you don't necessarily do it because it has a large cost for you.
But actually, what you eat is what matters the most to your carbon footprint. Even like more than transport, housing. Yeah. Like that's you can look it up. Like what they say. Like the one single biggest thing you can do to reduce your impact on the environment is to eat plant-based.
I thought flying was a much larger contribution.
Even like animal agriculture, even like transportation is.
I'm not sure about that one, but it's difficult if we don't have the numbers in front of us. Because I thought, as far as I recall, flying is one of the easiest things to cut out in terms of personal carbon footprint, and also housing.
But very few. Yeah, but very few people fly 3 times a day.
No, of course not. But again, like one flight to Spain is the same as eating like animal food for like half a year. And like if you think that carbon emissions has an ethical impact as well, then you can say that like flying one trip to Spain is equal to killing like 50 cows or something.
If you talk about like just the climate impact, you can make those comparisons. But if you talk about like the ethical side of it, they're still like uncomparable. Like
No, but that's where I disagree, because the impact of the carbon has on our planet kills lots of animals, right? Because when we pollute, we're destroying the ecosystems of like coral reefs or whatever, right?
But if you want to reduce carbon emissions, the best way you can do so, and something is within your power, is to stop supporting the mass breeding of carbon dioxide and methane producing animals.
Yeah, okay, I agree. But say we have, I'm willing to sacrifice the size of my apartment and the amount of flights I take to have a much lower carbon footprint. And then my personal vice is then eating cheese, which then increases it a bit and also has the side effect of harming some cows. Then I can say I'm still being a very ethical person compared to a lot of other people. And everything is like a cost-benefit calculation, you know? Does it make sense?
From the individual animal's perspective, it's unnecessary cruelty.
It is, but everything is, you know? Like everything over the minor standard of living is cruelty on an environmental scale. And we still do it.
I will say I disagree. Not everything we do is unnecessary. We, as humans, we have to express ourselves, and we have to. Our cognitive abilities also comes with we have to have some pleasure and some like unnecessary things to feel in life, to feel complete. But that shouldn't come of the cost of someone else.
But it does.
But we can try as best as we can when we know an action has a victim to try to take those actions that causes the least harm.
Yes, as we should. And we can all do that in different ways, you know. Like cheese is has a very direct ethical consequence, while an iPhone has perhaps a much less obvious ethical consequence, but is still a substantial one. And I can choose to cut out one or the other.
Yeah, and also I'm not arguing against like if people find out, okay, you have 2 smartphone companies, this one is really shitty using lots of child labor, but this one seems to be a bit more fair to their workers. And of course, I'm not advocating to not choose the ethical one there.
It's just a question of where am I willing to go at personal costs to do a better thing for other people. Does that make sense? Like I'm not willing to give up cheese, but I'm willing to do a lot of other stuff. Like not buying new phones, buying secondhand clothing, live in a small apartment, not flying. And then I can still eat my cheese and be like, yeah, okay, that's one of the shitty things I do, but I do all these other things that are so much better, and I choose to stop at those rather than not eating cheese.
If you was a female food slave, I hope no one would rape you or take your babies away and then kill you off when you can't produce milk anymore.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just being annoying. So yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for sitting down and the chat.
Yeah. Okay. Good luck, man.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.